I'd like to, can I please ask, I think the students were starting to now become quite conversant with each other. They must be hotly debating the topics on hand. So I'd like to quickly throw it to them for some questions. Students, you have some questions for Antara, please.
So, what are the opportunities for students like us? What are the opportunities for students like us for your magazine?
It actually depends on how good your work is. So, I can't see you. Okay, I can see you now. If you're sending poetry or fiction or art, I mean, it's equal opportunity, that's all I can say. The rest depends on the quality of submissions. That you have to keep in mind. And also one thing I must make clear here is that because we are a little finicky about quality, even if it is quite good, we may not publish it. Do not take it to heart. It does not mean that you or anybody else is a bad poet or bad writer. It just means that you'll have to try a little harder. That's all.
Are we improving? Because this is the incubation ground. All these colleges are incubators for the writers of the future. Would be writers, editors of print media in television, writing books. So are we really incubating the new writers, or is it slowly dying out, or what's happening?
I think there are people who, want to sort of make a beginning. And so the college magazine gives them that space. But everybody who writes is not someone who would eventually like to continue to be a writer. They are writing because somebody has prodded them, or they feel that while they are in college they have to have something in print. But a handful of people, I think, do continue writing. And that little space while in college, I think, is an important space that needs to be nurtured. This is the quality of the entire magazine will not be very high, it won't be literary as such, but it is mentoring young writers. So it serves that purpose, the way I see it.
Thank you, Isabel. Isabel is one of our finest playwrights. She is the founder of the Mustard Seed Art Company, a theatre company which has been active. Isabel, how many years? 25?
25.
25 years this year. Jose, can we also see? Yes. Congratulations to Mustard Seed, 25 years.
Thank you.
Amazing institute.
About some history or means there are many churches or temples. How to write about that?
That's fantastic. Actually, Prabha, right, is starting our own very good little magazine. I think it's on the internet called Damdi Mati. Look it up, damdimati.net.
Yeah, I think that's where you should send that, because
please,
the little magazine,
think about it.
It's different. That kind of an article would probably not find space, because we are theme based. But Damdi Mati would, because it is, it is a Goa-centric thing, and it is obviously it's going to be really good from what I hear, and all the best to you. You must send it to them, and it's on the internet. All your friends can access it and see it also.
Also, one thing that Antara was saying was that the purpose of the little magazine, I mean, in the way you defined it, is for dissemination, rather than focusing on the idea of it being a print. It's more about getting to readers, and so the internet offers you that ability even without Damdi Mati. You can start a blog. You can have your first years can have a website. There are all kinds of different ways to get your content across.
Hello everyone. And these students are more of journalism students, journalism and mass comm. So they are more into writing reports and a lot of feature stories compared to the literature. So is there a benchmark for these students to reach that category? As in, what kind of quantity or quality of write-ups do you expect from these students? Suppose if it is a feature write-up.
Well, I think the first idea is that the idea has to be authentic, that it should be of relevance. But I haven't really rejected any writing so far. What I do is I work with the people who want to write. So, I mean, that's another avenue that we could open up. I think it's very important not just to publish things as they come along, but also if there is something genuine there, to help that person to,
You can't publish it as it comes anyway.
Yeah.
You have to work a lot on it, especially when it's translation. It's like, 50% of the work is done by you and 50% by the translator. And even when it's original writing, you're absolutely right, you have to work on it. But only when you know that there is something there.
It has to have some meaning for your publication and what you perceive for the readers, finally. And I think in little magazines we don't really mind working with people. I've done that with Parmal. A lot of stuff has come to me, content, essays, and I know that if I were to publish them as they come in, that it's not going to hold. So I write back to the authors if I think it is of importance, that particular idea that the author has or experience. And so far, we have been able to collaborate. We go back and forth 3-4 times, and then we come to what we agree to be our best version. And that way, I think, it's learning all the time anyway. I don't think anyone comes up with a finished product immediately.
I remember during my formative years, there was this Satya Katha in Marathi, which was doing the similar type of work. They used to, whenever they got some story or some article, they used to ask the writer to rewrite according to their needs. And mostly they used to mark the manuscript and ask them what to change, how to change and all that. And copy editing was done later. Is this the process you also follow? Because getting back to the writer and asking them to rewrite, sometimes the writers don't feel well, they take it bad, yeah.
We have different, I follow a different process for articles and a different one for translations, which is the literary part. For the translations, we have to really work hard, and there are several ways of doing it. One is to work on the English translated copy that we got, and then compare it with the original. If the original language is something that either Pratik or I read, between the two of us we can sort of make out about 4 or 5 languages. So then that's fine. If it's a language that neither of us reads at all, then we have to get back to the author or to the translator and say, okay, what exactly did you mean by this sentence? What was the original sentence? So therefore you change it. And finally, if you've done a lot of changes to the translation, then I send it back to either the translator or to the original author, just to see that it is right, because you're sort of working in the dark a bit with translations. We are also very keen to see that the translation itself reads well. There are a lot of people doing translations and have been. Our government has been quite, active in translations, but unfortunately they're not very appealing. They're not very reader friendly, and I think a bad translation actually harms the writer. So you just go through it and say, God, what a terrible writer. What kind of what is this or sentence is this? So if you want to actually represent the author's best interest, you have to make changes in the in the translation in order for it to be. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you get perfect translations. But a lot of times you do have to put in a lot of work.
Gulzar, and he said there are some words which Gulzar uses which cannot be translated into English. So he leaves them as they are. He translates Gulzar's poetry into English.
I know. We've been translating Gulzar's poetry into English much before Pavan Verma. In fact, we were supposed to bring out a book, which unfortunately we still haven't been able to, and Gulzar Sahab has been very kind and has kept the book with us for like 6 years now. And yeah, and there are all these other people asking him for it, but he's really been very sweet. He's one of our supporters as well. So what we do is, Pratik is his translator of poetry, and before Pavan Verma did it. But so we translate it. If there is any question, then you ask him. So how is it? Explain the meaning to me. I do it usually because Pratik wants to, Pratik will say, okay, I can't quite make out. So then I'll call up Gulzar Sahab and say, what exactly did you mean about, what exactly does this, what are the connotations, what is it that you're trying to get at, and he and a number of our other poets and authors have been so extremely kind that they actually take the time to explain it so that you can put it across in English, which is not an indigenous Indian language, therefore it has its own problems. It is much easier to translate maybe between Malayalam and Bengali, even though they're a south and a north and whatever, than English, because it's very different.
A quick one. Agush mentioned that a lot of writers come from the engineering colleges, medical colleges. He is very right on that, because I studied in Goa Engineering College at Pharmagudi, and our college ran a magazine called Reflex. It still does, and for many years it won the best magazine of the year, whatever. They have written college magazines some kind of award. So in the 86 or so, I was the editor of that, and I had to put the whole magazine together. We had 4 sections: English, Hindi, Konkani and Marathi. And just for the heck of it, I added one page which said other languages section, Portuguese and Greek and something else. Some nonsense in those, just one paragraph. But prior to the year when I was chief editor, I was just on the team, the English section team, playing some small role. And I remember our chief editor of that time, Sanchez Ribero, he faced a problem because after the magazine was out, remember this is an engineering college, so we have civil, mechanical, electronics, and electronics and electrical. So one of the advertisers, Tamba, he's got a crushing, metal crushing industry. They said, I'm not going to pay for that full page ad which I gave you all. I said, why, what is the problem? Have you seen the page that was opposite that advertisement? No, we went to the magazine, we went, open it up, what have we done wrong? And there was one of our very technical articles with a complete drawing of bending moment, shear force and sections and a proper illustration, design of a push-up bra. I mean, obviously you have to show the triangle. I mean, it was a very poor diagram, it looked like a mountain or something like that. But he was very offended. He said, how can you do this against me? And my head is on the other side, he refused to. So we poor engineers sometimes get very confused. We don't know what is right. Who published a magazine called The Junior Statesman for the youth in Calcutta. So could you tell us about your experiences with a kind of little magazine?
Let me just start off by saying that the history of little magazines in India is actually much older than most people know. During the first war of independence, the entire Indian record, the Indian side of the conflict, was reflected in little magazines. Because the British by that time had forbidden Indians to publish printed material. So we have script magazines. People would actually sit down, the Indian side would, the rulers would employ writers to put out magazines entirely written in script. So if you want to look at the Indian side of the 1857 war, you have to go to little magazines. It's nowhere else. And then when you come into the modern nationalist period, our entire national history is little magazines. You know, from Raja Ram Mohan Roy, from the Brahmo Samaj, right down to Gandhi, Navjeevan, they were all little magazines. So we have a very noble tradition of little magazines. Because it is the first youth magazine in India. And we had all kinds of people coming in, from students like first year students. One of the two people who came in, like that off the street.
Yes, we have the same complaint in the little magazine. They said that, you know, we can't read it and it's, the font is too small. So we first changed it. We started with 9 points, then we went up to 9.5, then they said it's still, they still couldn't read it. So then we made it 10 points. And then finally, I think now it's 11 or on 12.5 or something. But you know, I just, till the complaint stopped, I started increasing I kept on increasing the point size. And then finally the complaint stopped. It also is actually a good thing because you realize that your readers are not all teeny boppers. If they are complaining about the font size, they are more elderly and mature people who are reading it.
I have had to present a letter of some need regarding the Museum of Christian Art, of which I am a member of the committee, to our Chief Minister, Manohar Parrikar. And on both occasions, he has given the letter back to me. Mache the font older karun. So then we redo it into 14 size font, Times New Roman 14. Then he can read. Else is lost. If you give him a letter with 11 or 12, he will just keep it aside. He cannot read it. So he better to use a larger font. Can we have some recommendations?
One thing that always happens when these trajectories are kind of drawn is the history of this part of India falls out of it. And I would really suggest, including the pioneering, I noticed when you started your history of the little magazine movement, you mentioned 2 English organs, and then you went to one in Bengal. What we very often found here is because of kind of a different encounter that takes place here. I don't know if you know the first, you probably know the first printing press is here in Goa, and you have this very vibrant print culture here. You have a different kind of civic engagement, civic relationship that takes place here. You have in fact citizens of a republic 50 years before anyone else. And I would suggest when we talk about little magazines and we're starting to draw these lines, you will almost certainly find the ancestors of even the Bengal publication here. Who did Francis Lewis Gomes write for? You know, the only problem is that somehow these parts of our mutual history fall out of what is recognized because it's written in Portuguese, perhaps, and things like that.
Since because they're only first year. Perhaps, Antara, you could give us some recommendations on other magazines, little magazines or subaltern magazines. I quite like Himal South Asian. So could you suggest 3 or 4 names for suggested reading?
Himal, which comes out from Nepal, it's an excellent magazine absolutely on South Asia. Unfortunately, I can't think of that many other magazines which, but those are all, there are big magazines. Yeah, those are big magazines. Himal is also not a little magazine in that way because it is also, it is much bigger. It is a funded magazine. It is independent, but it is funded. So, but it's an excellent magazine, it's true. When I'm talking about little magazines, I'm thinking of magazines which are not funded, which are actually brought out by personal passion and enterprise. So, like Jag and like others, that's where, and I'm very happy that you talked about the little magazine. you actually didn't mention any particular magazine.
I'm not familiar with magazines, but I do know, for instance, the Marinetti. Remember,